Chapter 3 Earth Movers. Daisy gripped Jesse and pulled him along as they walked up to the Douglas fir. She shaded her eyes from the sun and called out, "Hello!" Jesse shook his head while Emmy sat, her tail in a happy blur as they waited. The Douglas fir stood there silently, as the trees usually do. Daisy cupped her hands around her mouth. "Hey there!" she hollered. She stepped closer and wrapped her knuckles around the trunk. "Hello, Douglas fir. We're here to help, if we can. Anyone home?" "You know," she said to Jess, "in my book on tree lore, it says the Douglas fir stands for wisdom and dignity." Jesse squinted up at the tall fir. "I can see that," he said. Emmy jumped up and circled the tree 3 times. Then she stopped, lifted her hind leg, and tinkled all over the tree trunk. "Emmy," said Daisy, "that's not polite." Jesse burst out laughing. "Sure it is. It's dragon piddle. Probably magic." "Magical tinkle," Daisy giggled. Emmy trotted over to the squawking aspen and once again lifted her hind leg. She had saved a generous sprinkling of dragon piddle for the second tree. "So what does the squawking aspen stand for?" Jesse asked. Daisy stared up and thought a bit. "I want to say a bunch of waggling tongues, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up." Daisy walked over to the squawking aspen. "I apologize for my dog, dragon," she said. For a second, it looked like the tree really did mind. Its pale green leaves quivered indignantly in the breeze. But then the breeze died down and the leaves stopped moving. Daisy sighed and stood back, hands on her hips. "Maybe they don't trust us just yet." "Maybe," Jesse said. Emmy let out a sharp bark of disagreement. "Then again," said Daisy, "maybe they just want to mess with us." "Well, now that we've seen it," said Jesse, "we have to do something." Emmy barked twice to say yes, and they started into the ravaged wood. Jesse and Daisy looked at each other. They didn't usually go into the deep woods. The woods were too dense and dark for just a casual walk. But there was nothing casual about this situation. They both nodded and soberly followed Emmy. 5 minutes later, the deep woods began to thin out, and they came to what seemed to be a natural clearing. The clearing was about the size of 3 football fields. Jesse, Daisy, and Emmy crept to the edge of it and took cover behind the trunk of a tall spruce tree. Neither end of the clearing stood 2 supersized dump trucks, a steam shovel, and 2 bulldozers, all of them brand new and painted bright orange. They didn't seem to be workers around. "What's that?" whispered Daisy, pointing to the huge machine off to the side that dwarfed all the others. "That's an earth mover," Jesse whispered back. "I saw one in Venezuela. It was mowing down trees in the forest like they were matchsticks. I was really little, so at first I thought it was neat. Then my parents explained that the trees would never grow back and that the forest and all the animals would be gone forever." "So, the Dragon Slayer is a tree slayer too," Daisy said. "I guess he can't do it with magic, so he needs to do it with big machines. But where is he?" Jesse said, scanning the clearing. "He had to have done most of this work during the storm." "I wonder why," Daisy said. "Maybe so he wouldn't get caught," Jesse said. "Let's check it out." Daisy grabbed his sleeve. "No, let's wait here and make sure he's not lurking around," she said. Jesse nodded. Could be a trap. He checked his watch. They would give it 15 minutes, just to be safe. Then they waited in silence. Beneath Jessie's hand, Emmy trembled, but she sat between them patiently, her long pink forked tongue lolling out the side of her mouth. As if Emmy had begun to keeping track of time in her head, she jumped up and started into the clearing exactly 15 minutes later. Jessie and Daisy were right behind. Nose to the ground, Emmy made a beeline over to a foot of a huge mound of fresh, damp earth. Next to the mound was a hole. The cousins went over and peered down. The hole was wide and deep, and at the bottom they caught a glimpse of an open space, like an underground cave. "What do you think it is?" Jessie asked, his voice eerily returning to him from the damp, dark hole. "It looks like a mine," Daisy said grimly. "A very, very old, deep mine." "What does St. George want with a mine?" Jessie wondered. "I have no idea," Jessie said, "but let's get out of here before he comes back and shoves us in." They walked through the deep woods. At the edge, Daisy stopped and addressed the two trees again. "We'll be back," she promised. "With a real plan," Jessie added, and Emmy barked twice. When they got back home, Emmy was hungry and tired. Safe inside the garage, she assumed her dragon form and looked at Jessie and Daisy expectantly. Jessie went to the house and returned a few minutes later with a head of kale, a bunch of spinach, and a chunk of Swiss cheese. Emmy made quick work of these, and afterward Jessie and Daisy tucked her into the nest of socks. Daisy read her Goldilocks and the Three Bears, while Jessie leaned against the packing crate and listened. Before Daisy reached the end of the story, Emmy's eyelids were drooping. "Too much sudden activity after too many days of just lying around," Daisy said to Jessie, out of the corner of her mouth, sounding just like her mother. "The weather's spell probably tuckered her out," Jessie replied with a yawn. When Daisy closed the book, Emmy heaved a sleepy sigh and snuggled down into the bed of socks. Emmy's bed is not too big and not too small. It's just right. "For a while," said Jessie, "until Emmy gets bigger." "Sweet dragon dreams," said Daisy. After the cousins had bid Emmy a final good night, sleep tight, even though it was still only the afternoon, they tiptoed out of the garage and locked it. They both knew that if she needed them, she would bark very loudly 3 times, and one of them would come running, even if it was the middle of the night. Jessie and Daisy wearily trudged through the kitchen and up the stairs. They were starved, but eating would have to wait. They went to Jessie's room and turned on the computer. Jessie sat down and logged on to the Dragon site. They were both grateful to see Professor Anderson was in the mood for another visit. With his bushy brows deeply furrowed, he listened as Jessie and Daisy briefed him about St. George's terrible path of destruction, the earth mover, and the hole leading down the old mine. "Old mines are dangerous places, and he's got all this heavy machinery, and we're just a couple of kids. And what are we supposed to do, Professor?" Jessie asked. Daisy bumped Jessie with her hip and whispered, "You're whining. He hates whining." But the professor didn't seem to notice. Usually, Jessie and Daisy only saw his face close up, but Professor Anderson moved away from the screen and leaned back in his chair. For the first time, they could see what he was wearing: an old-fashioned suit, a string tie, and suspenders. "I couldn't really say," said the professor, hooking his thumbs in the suspenders, which were red and white striped. Jessie and Daisy stared at the screen. They were expecting some ominous warning about a stern lecture, or at very least hints about what to do next. "I'm a dragon man myself," the professor went on. "Ask me about masking, scrying, even spelling, and I'm the man for you. but mines and machines, and all have always rather flummoxed me. They were never my forte. Jessie turned to Daisy and asked, "What's a fort have anything to do with anything?" Daisy shrugged, equally perplexed. "It's not my area of expertise," said the professor. "I've never cared for mines, I must say. All those tunnels snaking beneath the earth make me feel claustrophobic. Closed in," the professor shivered. "I feel the exact same way," said Daisy, and just as she was about to tell him about her own worst encounter with the enclosed spaces, getting stuck behind a clawfoot bathtub when she was 3 years old, the screen fizzled out. Jessie glowered at the computer and said, "Doesn't that man ever say goodbye or good night or good luck?" Just then he heard Uncle Joe call down for dinner. Jessie and Daisy took a look around themselves. They were covered in mud. "Be there in 5, Daisy shouted as they raced each other to the sink. "I can't believe it turned into such a glorious day," said Aunt Maggie, beaming at Jessie and Daisy. "Raining 1 minute, sunny the next," Jessie said. "Practically like it was magic." Daisy kicked him beneath the table. They agreed upstairs not to tell the grown-ups about what was going on in the dell. After all, the dell was their special place. Its problems were their problems, not Daisy's parents'. "Poppy, tell us about the mines around here," Daisy said. Uncle Joe gave a long, graying ponytail, an enthusiastic tug. If there was anything he liked more than talking about rocks, it was the mines. The whole area is honeycombed with them. After all, this area used to host a prosperous gold mine in the early 1900s. "We know that, Poppy," said Daisy. "That's how Gold Mine City got its name." "Yep, whole area was overrun by prospectors bringing up gold fever. It was a boom city with its own opera house, hotel, saloon, you name it, they had it. Then, practically overnight, the town shut down," he said with a thoughtful expression. "It was a ghost town until the 1970s, when the college came and things began to look up again." "Did the mine run out of gold?" Daisy asked. "Is that what Gold Mine City just turned into a ghost town?" "Nope," said Uncle Joe. "They just blew the mine up." "Blew up?" said Jessie, setting his milk glass down with a clunk. "Kaboom," said Uncle Joe. "Some say the explosion was caused by gas. Others say it was a human who caused it. Something to do with a feud." "What kind of a feud?" The cousins chimed in eagerly. "A feud between the mining company and a farmer," said Uncle Joe, squeezing more ketchup and mustard onto his hamburger. "The farmer who worked the land behind this house, as a matter of fact." "Our farmer?" Daisy asked. And that's where we've got to stop today. We will finish chapter 3 tomorrow.